We humans are really good at telling stories. And before we had robots, we had stories about robots. And these go way back. They go back to things like the myths of the ancient Greeks. This, for example, is Pandora, the first artificial human, an AI. She was given intelligence by a team of programmer gods. And the stories that the Greeks told about robots included things like artificial women who helped out, created by Hephaestus, and other stories too about people who fell in love with robots, who fell in love with artificial beings that they had created. And even today, we tell stories about robots, and we give them genders. We see the fembot with her metal curves, her metal breasts. She's very much the beautiful woman. So these have been around for a long while. A few years ago, I started researching a book about sex and robots. And I was very interested because I was hearing a lot of headlines about how people were going to fall in love with robots and that they would replace humans. And I didn't believe it. This headline forecast the end of sex. The idea that we wouldn't, as humans, have sex anymore because we would have a robot lover instead. It predicted that the robots were so real that men wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a robot and a woman, which I think is unfair to the men. They went so far as to say things like, sex robots will make sure that the world doesn't need porn anymore. It will replace this. I don't think the porn industry will stop anytime soon. But they kept focusing on the idea of a really realistic female sex robot. When it says realistic, I want to show you the state of robots, sex robots in the world today, because there aren't really any in existence. There's still a race to produce the first. People are getting close, but there's none commercially available. They're still prototypes. And when they say realistic, this is what they mean. This is as advanced as it gets. On the left is Roxy, with 3 X's, and Roxy was unveiled in a trade show nearly 10 years ago. And she didn't do very much, and people laughed when they saw her. We've never seen a working model. It's really just been this prototype. On the right is Samantha. Samantha was a sex robot that had an artificial intelligence built into her, and she could respond to your actions, so that if you were nice to her, she was nice back to you. About 25 models were sold privately, but the owner and the manufacturer, Sergio Santos, has stopped making them now because he received such negative coverage from the media. In the middle is Harmony, and Harmony is the closest thing there is to a commercially available robot today for sexual companionship. And she's made by a company who makes sex dolls called Real Dolls. I went to visit her when I was writing my book. So this is her. She has an animatronic face, so she can move her head, she can smile and blink. She cannot move at all from the neck down. She is completely stationary. She cannot stand up on her own. So what they have done is taken one of their sex doll models and they have added some robotics to the face and the head. And they have added an artificially intelligent conversational personality. And you can actually get the AI personality as a standalone app on your phone for $20, and you can have a virtual girlfriend. And again, it's heavily gendered. It's never boyfriends, it's always girlfriends. This is Harmony, and hopefully I will be able to play the video of her talking.
How are you today?
Very well. I can't wait until we're alone. I've got a special surprise for you.
Oh yeah?
I will not tell you yet. I will wait for the right moment.
Now, the more research I did into sex robots, the more I saw them as being a bit of a technological niche. I don't think these will ever be mainstream. And there are a number of reasons. The first is that it's very, very hard to make realistic human robots. It's technologically difficult, it's computationally difficult, and it's very expensive. Second, there's a problem here. It objectifies women. And there's no real design going on here other than let's make a sex doll that moves. There's no corporate finance, there's no big backing. It's pretty much novelty and will remain very rare. But I was really interested in how we could use technology to create other forms of intimate interactions. What if we could build something different? What if we could build technology that would help us interact with that technology and with one another? So in 2016, I ran a hackathon. The hackathon is 24 hours spent building technological prototypes. And we invited many different types of people. We invited artists, technologists, industry specialists. We had psychologists, material scientists, musicians, all sorts of people from all ages and all walks of life. And 50 of them got together in a room, and over 24 hours, they prototyped new forms of sex tech, technology for sex. But very quickly, it became more than just about the sex. It became about intimacy and creating moments and mediating relationships. It worked so well that we actually ran it again the following year. And what was interesting was that I expected people would produce more of the same types of sex toys and sex technology that we already have. So for example, the sex toys that are around today, many of them are now considered to be smart in that you can connect them to the internet. And there's a number of reasons you might want to do this. Could be perhaps that you're in a long-distance relationship and you want to be able to interact with your partner remotely. They've also been used in sex work, where people who are webcam models can use sex toys that are controlled by their clients. But this went beyond that. This went into looking at things where people could connect on different levels. So for example, the tail you see on the peacock's fan tail on the right-hand side, that was a team of people who said, you know, if someone has a penis, you can tell if they're aroused. Can't really do that with a vagina, so we're going to make it into some piece of art. So they got a vaginal egg and they covered it with sensors that were moisture sensors. And when those moisture sensors were triggered, it opened a fan like a peacock's tail. And I thought that's such a nice expression of art, but also that has potential in things like prosthetics as well. People could do really interesting things with this technology that means sex is more accessible for everyone. On the left-hand side, the things that look like stringed tentacles, those are soft robotics. They curl around body parts. You can place them anywhere, and when you squeeze the controller, they contract around your skin. And it was the idea that you could be touched, and that you could feel touch, even when the person wasn't there to touch you. It looks a little creepy. This was something that I felt was one of the nicest ideas. And it was someone saying, what if someone isn't there to hug me? How can I feel like I'm being held? And this group created a series of plastic tubes. And that's me lying on a sleeping bag across some chairs with these tubes wrapped around me. And when I flicked a switch, the tubes filled up with air and squeezed me and hugged me so I could feel as if I was being held. It was very strange, but it was very sweet. Now, these were just things that were imagined in 24 hours. People coming up with an idea and making very rudimentary prototypes. But I like to think that maybe technology can be something that we can use to bring ourselves together, not to replace humans like people are worried will happen with sex robots, but to encourage others and to inspire others and to help forge those bonds and those relationships. There is a crisis in the world today in loneliness, and people are reporting they feel more and more lonely. And I often hear commentary like, technology is isolating us. I don't believe that's true. I think we're better connected than ever. It's just that we long for the personal interaction. And in some cases, we aren't able to do that. In some cases, it's very, very difficult when the person you love is in a different place. And so maybe the technology we use that we think we were worried would replace humans can actually enhance humans instead. In all the research I did for my book, the story that kept coming up from people who talked about owning sex robots was that they wanted companionship. It was a really common theme, and I talked to people who own sex dolls, because they're the most likely people who would eventually own a sex robot. And they talked about their dolls in extremely reverent and extremely respectful terms. They talked about how they gave them names and backstories and personalities, and they dressed them up and they photographed them. And what they were describing was a relationship. It wasn't just an object that they were using for sex. Some of them were, but that wasn't the main driving force. And the really interesting thing that I found was that although we tend to think of those sorts of people as being a little bit strange, a little bit lonely, they were actually finding friendship amongst themselves, amongst each other. So the group of people who own these sex dolls, they talk online on forums, and then they meet up together, and they hang out together. And in fact, they go on holiday together. And sometimes they take their dolls with them on holiday. And it's because that's where they're accepted. They have found a way of communicating with each other through technology, through the internet, and they've gained new friends. So these fears that we're going to be replaced by robots, I just think they're quite unfounded, and we don't have the evidence. Now, there's a lot still to learn about how we interact with machines. And we're growing into a world where many of our interactions involve direct interactions with machines, with perhaps AIs, like Alexa or Siri or Cortana. And the interesting thing is that we are forming new social categories. We are treating these AIs and robots in specific ways. We are learning to differentiate between them and other humans. And we do it very naturally. So when there's a lot of panic about children not saying thank you to Alexa, or people who won't know how to be polite in real life when they're talking to machines all the time, no, we're actually really good at working out what belongs where and how we speak to these machines. And this is a very, very exciting time to be studying this. And so I think that the message that we can take away from all of this is that interaction is key. And even if we're interacting with machines, that's a new form of interaction. It's not taking away from us as humans. It's enhancing what we do. And so I'm not scared of what's coming in the future, and I'm not scared that technology is going to replace us. There are going to be changes, but there are always changes. We have adapted to technology over time. You know, anything from the printing press to the aeroplane, to the newspaper, to the smartphone. We are really good at adapting. And I think we have a really good opportunity to take that technology and use it to enhance our relationships with each other. Thank you.